I am putting this down the way I tell it to you. If we were sitting outside a truck stop at 3 a.m., 2 coffees, bad light, and that quiet stretch of night where you start saying true things because nobody's awake to argue. And before you ask, no, I'm not doing this to get attention. I'm writing it because once you've seen what I saw, you realize stories like this don't go away when you stop talking. They just sit in you like grit under a fingernail you can't dig out. My name is Damian Harlow. I'm from Texas. I pull freight for a living, long haul mostly. When you spend your life chasing deadlines across states, you start collecting little rules the way old men collect pocket knives. Rule 1. If the woods go quiet, you don't keep walking like nothing happened. Rule 2. If you're tired, you make fewer smart choices. Rule 3. Paper maps don't lose signal. I broke at least 2 of those rules in Arizona. It was August, which people picture as dry heat and rattlesnakes and that postcard desert glow. But up on the Mongolian rim, August is a different animal. It's a monsoon season, mornings that trick you into thinking the way will behave, and afternoons where the sky turns the color of a bruise and starts throwing lightning like it's personal. I just delivered a load that had me crossing I-40 like a metronome, Amarillo to Holbrook to Winslow. Then I peeled south and climbed into pine country. You'd laugh at what I did next. I stopped at a gas station outside Flagstaff and bought a folding paper map like my granddad used to keep in the glove box. Not for nostalgia, for sanity. The cabin was listed as quiet retreat, which usually means you won't have self-service and we're not refunding you. It sat in a stand of Ponderosa about 15 minutes down a rutted forest road. Wood walls, tin roof, a porch big enough for a chair and bad decisions. The owner didn't meet me, just texted a keypad code and a warning. Bears sometimes don't leave food out. Bears, fine. I brought what I always bring with when I'm somewhere remote. A 12 gauge, shells, a headlamp, medkit, a flare gun, bear spray, and the habit of checking my surroundings like it's a job requirement. Truckers do that. You spend enough nights parked in strange places, you learn the difference between quiet and too quiet. There were 2 other cabins within shouting distance, one down the slope, one farther up. I'd see them through the trees while driving in, but I didn't see people until later. First afternoon, I met a guy on an ATV, mid-40s, sunburned, wearing a ball cap that looked fused to his head. He slowed when he saw my truck. "You the renter?" he called. "Yeah." He nodded toward my cabin. "Name's Wes. I keep an eye on these places for the owner. Make sure folks don't leave trash out and invite the wildlife to dinner." He said wildlife the way some people say ex-wife. We talked a couple minutes, small talk. I mentioned hiking. He pointed out an old fire lookout trail, said it was a good view if the weather stayed calm. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "If you hear knocks at night, don't answer." I stared at him. Knocks? Wes shrugged, like he wished he hadn't said it. "Just, you'll know what I mean." He rolled away before I could ask more. That should have been my first clue. That evening, the storms came early. Clouds rolled in thick and low like smoke. Wind shoved through the pines and made them hiss. By the time I'd heated up a can of chili and eaten it straight out of the pot, like a civilized man, the rain started. Big drops first, then sheets, then a steady hammering on the tin roof that made the cabin feel like a drum. I sat on the porch under the overhang with coffee, watching lightning flash through the trees. It felt good, honest, like the weather wasn't pretending to be anything. Then, over the rain, came the sound. Knock, knock, knock. Not on the cabin, not on a tree right next to me, farther off, up the slope. It wasn't the random thump of a branch, it had pacing. Space between each strike, like whoever, whatever, was doing it had a sense of rhythm. I listened, waited for laughter, a human voice, anything. Nothing. A minute later it came again, farther away, like an answer. Knock, knock, knock. My skin tightened. I don't spook easy. I've driven through ice storms that turned the interstate into a graveyard. I've had a man try my cab door at a rest stop while I pretended to sleep with a tire thumper in my hand. This was different. This wasn't danger in the way you can name. It was the feeling of being noticed by something you can't see. I went inside and locked the door, not because I thought a lock would stop anything big, but because old habits keep you alive. You do the next right thing even if it feels pointless. I slept, but not well. The kind of sleep where your body is down and your brain keeps a watch. The next morning looked like the night never happened. Sun punched through clean blue sky. The air smelled sharp and bright, wet pine and warm sap. I made coffee the way I always do, measured, routine, the small rituals that keep your hands steady. Then I checked the map and packed light, water, snacks, headlamp, knife, bear spray. Shotgun stayed at the cabin. I told myself I didn't need to stomp through the woods armed like I was hunting trouble. I took the trail toward the old lookout. The first mile was easy. Soft needles underfoot, sunlight dropping through branches in warm stripes. I remember thinking, this is exactly what I needed. Then the forest did something subtle. It stopped sounding alive. No birds, no chipper squirrel noise, no wind moving the tops. That silence didn't crash down. It slid in gently, like a blanket. Rule 1 flashed in my head. I stopped. And when I stopped, I realized something worse. It felt like the silence had started because I'd arrived. I kept walking anyway, slow, scanning. A trucker's eye is trained for anomalies. The one brake light out, the tire that looks slightly low, the pallet strapping wrong. In the woods, that turns into noticing what doesn't fit. That's how I saw the rock. Dead center in the trail sat a stone about the size of a small melon. It wasn't half buried like it had rolled there. It sat on top of the needles, placed. Around it, the needles were disturbed in a half circle, like something had stood there and shifted, waiting. I stepped over it and kept going, feeling stupid for letting a rock get into my head. 2 bends later, I found bark stripped from a pine, vertical gouges at shoulder height, too high for a deer, too controlled for random damage. I ran my fingers near the marks without touching, like the tree might bite. Then I saw the print. Not a clean mud cast like those TV shows love. This was an impression in the damp ground under the needles, as if something heavy had stood there long enough for the earth to remember. 5 toe shapes, wide heel, wrong proportions. I squatted and stared until my knees started to ache. That's when the sound came, uphill behind the trees, a long, rising whoop that felt less like an animal call and more like a question asked with confidence. My chest tightened. I stood slowly, turning. Between 2 trunks, I saw movement, a dark form shifting sideways, not rushing, not fleeing. It moved with that controlled economy you see in something that's big and experienced and not afraid of the terrain. A rock snapped past my shoulder and hit a tree to my left with a crack like a bat to a fence post. That wasn't random, that was a message. I backed up. Another rock bounced down the trail ahead of me, landing in my path like a roadblock. And that's when my pride finally shut up. I turned and walked back toward the cabin, fast enough that my heartbeat climbed into my throat, but not so fast I looked like prey. Behind me, another whoop, closer, then a heavy footstep that didn't try to hide. It wanted me to know it was there. By the time the cabin came into view, sweat was running down my spine and my hands were shaking like I'd guzzled an energy drink. I slammed the door behind me and locked it. Then I stood there listening, waiting for something to hit the walls. Nothing did. The quiet was worse. I did what every modern man does when the old world gets too close. I tried to make it fit into the internet. My signal was garbage. 1 bar near the window if I held my phone like I was trying to catch lightning myself, but it was enough. I searched. Bigfoot, Arizona, Mogollon Rim, Knox Whoops, rock throwing. That's how I found the name, the Mogollon Monster, Arizona's version of Bigfoot. Same broad shape, same reports, 8-9 feet tall, dark hair, long arms. People describing wood knocks, whoops, rock throwing. And the smell, always the smell. Wet dog, rot, something metallic. Some accounts were dumb. You can tell. Guys trying to sell t-shirts. People describing glowing eyes and UFOs and everything else they can cram into a paragraph. But some were plain. Working men, hunters, hikers who sounded embarrassed to be writing it down at all. And the details lined up with what I had just experienced in a way that made my stomach go hollow. Knocks at night, silence in the woods, rocks thrown as warnings, escorted, herded, pushed out of certain areas. 1 line from an old scanned newspaper clipping stuck in my head. Something an older rancher supposedly said after seeing tracks. It ain't dumb, it's territorial. That's what got under my skin. Not that something was out there, not even that it might be dangerous, that it might be smart. Afternoon came, and with it, the monsoon again. Clouds thickened, wind rose, rain hammered the roof like a fist. Lightning flashed behind the trees, turning the world into strobing snapshots. I told myself I'd leave in the morning when the road dried a little. I told myself that if I stayed inside and didn't act like a threat, this thing would go back to whatever it did when it wasn't bothering humans. Then it knocked. Not in the woods, on the cabin. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, heavy, right on the wall near the porch. My mouth dried instantly. It came again, nearer the door, then a long scrape along the wood. Careful, curious, like a fingertip dragging. I stood in the kitchen with the shotgun now, because, don't be dramatic, stops being advice when your door is being tested. The porch light flickered. I moved to the window and lifted the curtain the width of a finger. Lightning flashed, and the world outside froze into a bright photograph. Something stood just beyond the porch rail. Too tall, broad shoulders, long arms, hanging like ropes. Head low on the shoulders. Dark hair plastered to its shape in the rain, and the smell hit even through the sealed windows. Wet rot, old dog, pennies. It turned its head slightly, not scanning, looking, right at the window, right where my eyes were. My legs went cold. I backed away from the window like it was a hot stove. The sound moved to the porch steps, boards creaking under weight. Then the doorknob rattled, not violently, not like a break-in, just a slow, exploratory twist. I clicked the shotgun safety off. The sound felt loud enough to announce my location to God. The knob stopped. For a few seconds there was only rain and my heartbeat. Then something bumped the wall once, like a shoulder check. Another bump, harder. The cabin creaked. Dust shifted from a beam. I raised the shotgun at the door and waited for it to come through. It didn't. Instead, there were 3 knocks, right on the door itself, almost polite. And then it stepped away. Heavy footfalls on wet boards. The porch steps groaned. The sound drifted off into the trees. I didn't move for a long time, not because I was brave, because my body didn't trust itself to move without making a mistake. When I finally did move, I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, shotgun across my lap, and listened to it circle outside. Not running, not thrashing, circling, like it was learning the cabin, learning me. I woke up late with my neck stiff and my mouth tasting like fear. But the storm had moved on. The air outside was bright and clean, like it had washed the world for someone else. The cabin smelled wrong, stale, animal, like something had been too close. I checked the locks, all intact. On the porch door, I saw a smear, dark and oily, as if wet hair had brushed against the wood and left something behind. On the porch steps were impressions pressed into damp dust, not bare claws, not boot treads, finger-like marks, long, deep, like someone had gripped the steps as they climbed. I decided to leave. No more hiking, no more maybe it's nothing, no more pretending I was the main character in a story where curiosity gets rewarded. I packed fast, kept the shotgun close, and stepped outside, scanning the tree line. Halfway to my truck, my phone buzzed. 1 bar of service. A message from Wes, the caretaker. Sent hours ago, delivered late. If you're still up there, don't go near the ravine trail. Someone went missing last week. Sheriff says lost. Folks up here say otherwise. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Missing. The word landed heavy. I got into my truck, turned the key. Nothing. No crank, no click. Dead silence. My stomach dropped. Battery was new. Truck was solid. This wasn't supposed to happen. Then I saw the dome light on. I hadn't turned it on. I don't leave lights on. Truckers don't. That's how you wake up stranded. I shut it off. Tried again. The engine turned over slow, then caught, coughing into life like it didn't want to. Relief hit me so hard, I almost laughed. Then I heard a scream. A human scream, sharp, terrified, cut off mid-note, like a hand clamped over a mouth. It came from the trees behind the cabin. I sat there in the driver's seat, with the engine running, hands on the wheel, and my brain split in two. One half said, "Leave, now, you're not a hero." The other half said, "Someone needs help." I wish I could tell you I chose smart. I grabbed a flare gun and bear spray, kept the shotgun, and got out. The forest looked normal in that insulting way it does after it scares you. Green, bright, peaceful, as if it never touched you. 10 yards in, I found a piece of blue plaid fabric snagged on a branch, torn like it had been yanked hard. Another 10 yards, a flashlight on the ground, still on, beam shining sideways through ferns. And then, drag marks. Something heavy had been pulled through pine needles toward the ravine trail. The smell got stronger as I followed. Rot and wet animal, and metal. My mouth tasted sour. I called out, "Hello?" like the word could protect me. No answer. At the ravine edge, the ground fell away into a steep drop of dark trees and slick boulders. Cold air rose from below like breath. Across the gap, on the opposite slope, I saw it, half hidden behind a pine trunk, huge and still. In its arms was a person, not held like prey in a jaw, not dangling from teeth, cradled close to its chest. The person's legs hung limp, one boot missing. For a second my brain refused to accept it. It tried to convert the scene into something else. A bear carrying a carcass, a man carrying a drunk friend. But the shape was wrong. The posture was wrong. The way it looked at me was wrong. It made a low grunt, soft, almost conversational, like it was amused I'd come this far. My hands moved on instinct. I raised the flare gun and fired. The flare streaked red through gray air and landed in brush below with a hiss, painting the ravine in ugly light. In that flare glow, I saw details I wish I hadn't. The creature's face wasn't a cartoon. It had structure. Eyes, deep set and dark. Nose flat. Mouth that looked too flexible when it shifted. Hair matted with rain. And scars. Pale lines under the hair like it had been in fights and won. It shifted the limp person in its arms and started moving down the slope with quiet control. Fast, sure-footed, like it knew every root and rock. Kidnapping. not hunting, taking. I fired the shotgun into the air, not at it. I wasn't trying to kill it. I was trying to make the world loud again, trying to scare it, trying to snap reality back into something animals obey. The blast echoed through the ravine. The creature didn't flinch, not even a shoulder twitch. That's when my blood truly ran cold. Because animals flinch. This thing didn't. It looked at me over its shoulder, like I was a nuisance. Then it disappeared down the slope with the person. I backed away from the ravine edge, breathing too hard, trying not to trip, trying not to become the second missing person in a story nobody believes. As I moved back through the trees, I heard it. Heavy footsteps to my right, parallel to me, not chasing, matching pace, keeping me in line, herding. It wasn't trying to catch me. It could have caught me in 3 strides. It was guiding me, pressing me toward the cabin and the road like a rancher moving cattle. Once I understood that, panic turned into something worse, the feeling of being managed. I broke into a run anyway. Behind me, branches snapped, not frantic, not sloppy, controlled, like the creature was pacing me and letting me run because it wanted me to run. I burst out into the clearing and dove into my truck, slammed the door, locked it, and threw it into gear. Mud sprayed, tires fought for grip. I was turning onto the forest road when the passenger side window exploded inward. Not a gunshot, not a crack. A full punch of glass and air. A rock the size of my fist had come through like it was thrown by a machine. Shards rained across the seat. One nicked my cheek. Warm blood ran down my jaw. I flinched so hard I almost yanked the wheel into a tree, but the truck grabbed traction and lunged forward. I kept my foot down, steering with stiff arms, ignoring the way the road tried to take me. In the rearview mirror, through the rain haze and flying mud, I saw the creature step out onto the road behind me. It stood there, huge, dark, motionless. And it lifted one arm, not waving, pointing, as if to say, "Go." I didn't stop until I hit pavement. I drove into Payson, with my hands shaking so bad I had to pull over twice just to breathe. At the sheriff's office, I walked in looking like a man who'd crawled out of a wreck. Broken window, blood on my face, mud everywhere, eyes like I hadn't slept in a week. They took me seriously at first, because they always take you seriously when you look like you got hurt. Then they started asking questions in that careful tone people use when they're trying to figure out whether you're lying or losing it. Did you see a bear? Were you drinking? Any drugs? Are you sure it wasn't a person? I told them about Wes, about the message, about the blue plate, about the limp body. That last part made them stop smiling politely. A deputy drove me back with 2 search and rescue guys. They found the torn plate, the dropped flashlight, the drag marks, the burned out flare spot below the ravine. They did not find the missing person. They did find something else. On a pine trunk near the ravine, about 8 feet up, were 3 deep grooves in the bark, like a heavy hand had pressed there hard enough to leave dents. One search and rescue guy stared at it a long time and finally said, very quietly, "That's not a bear." Nobody laughed, nobody made the joke. They just looked at the trees like they were seeing them differently. I left Arizona the next morning. I didn't go back to the cabin for my cooler. I didn't retrieve the chair. I didn't get closure. I just drove. On the road, the world felt too open and too normal. Traffic lights, billboards, fast food, people complaining about nothing. 2 weeks later, I was in a truck stop in New Mexico, half watching the TV while I filled out paperwork. Local news came on, Arizona segment. Search continues for missing caretaker last seen near the Mogollon Rim. They showed a photo. Wes, blue plaid shirt. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like my ribs shifted. I turned the TV off and sat there holding a coffee cup like it was an anchor. Because now it made sense. The scream, the plate, the limp body. It wasn't some random hiker. It wasn't a stranger. It was the guy who warned me not to answer knocks. And the worst part? The part that keeps me from filing this away as crazy cabin weekend is that I'm not sure the creature meant to kill me. I think it wanted something else, something specific, and I think it made a calculation when I showed up. It warned me, it tested the cabin, it herded me away from the ravine when I got too close, and when it took Wes, when it kidnapped him, it did it with the calm confidence of something that's done it before. So, if you ever go up into the pine country of Arizona during monsoon season and you get that clean smell of wet needles and you think you're alone, listen. If the birds go quiet, stop. If you hear 3 slow knocks in the woods, don't answer. And if you hear 3 slow knocks on your cabin door, don't pretend you didn't. Because whatever is out there, it already knows you're inside. And it doesn't knock because it's polite. It knocks because it's letting you know the rules.